Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to EonsOfBattle, and in this video I would like to break into the world of fancy bases and competition plinths. Wooden plinths are definitely not a new thing to this hobby. It's typically reserved for competition pieces or models meant strictly for display. One of the best ways to improve your painting ability is to pour hours and hours and hours into a single figure, trying out new things, playing with contrast and light, and really making it perfect. These are the things that'll make you a better painter, and they are a little different than classic army painting. And what better way to display these masterpieces than on a beautiful plinth? I'm a wargamer at heart, and I paint to play, but recently I have been painting more and more for display. I painted this Halloween diorama using some Reaper miniatures, and it was a surprisingly fun build. And the painting didn't take too long either. And I also painted these 5 adorable salamanders, sculpted by the genius Cobra Mode and printed for me by Draconis Fundamentus over on Etsy. I painted these guys up on stream, and just in case you didn't know, I stream live painting every evening Monday through Saturday. I love my little salamanders.
Salamanders. Salamanders. Salamanders. Salamander.
But these guys are definitely not meant for gaming. They are 3D printed resin, so they snap if I give them a dirty look. I know every one of them had some breakage while I was painting them, so the sooner they are on nice bases and out of my way, the better. Now, these models are not shown off properly on a stubby little 28mm base. No, not even a substantial 32mm. These guys need their own unique display plinth. And competition isn't the only reason to splash out on a custom base. Sometimes you want to feel a little extra. Sometimes you want to give them the old razzle dazzle. Maybe you want to commemorate your best mini ever with the best base ever. So let's scrounge around for some scrap wood and break out the saws. I am going to make 3 styles of bases, 2 unique square plinths and a handful of round ones. And the material I will be using is some cheap 1x pine stock I have laying around, a little piece of oak I found at the hardware store, and this oak dowel rod I found in my garage. I will also be using some leftover trim and decorative molding. All of this stuff is really easy to find at a hardware store that sells lumber. I went to Home Depot and they had some interesting stuff that would make great bases, no work required. These wooden furniture legs would make excellent mini displays, and even cheaper, these corner blocks for door trims would be super cheap and great display bases. And this thing! How is this not meant to be a display base for minis? Apparently, it's called a rosette. It's meant to go between a staircase railing and the wall, but they aren't fooling me. I know a diorama base when I see one. Now that I have my materials, let's get into the build. But before we get started, can I just say that I don't love the term plinth? Plinth. You ever have a word that just sounds wrong? According to Google, plinth is a decent name, a heavy base supporting a statue or vase. It's a fine name, but it lacks a certain panache. I would rather go with something a bit more catchy and interesting, like a model's throne, a fun foundation, a super base, a mega mounting, or a kit stand.
Whoa! I love your model's kit stand. What is that, walnut?
See, way better. Now, let me show you what you can do with some simple power tools and cheap wood. Was this video just an excuse to do some woodworking? I don't know, probably. First tool up is the table saw. Big and beefy. Not the easiest tool to use, but it should give me some nice clean cuts through this soft wood. Let's take some pine and make something nice out of it. This is going to be the biggest plinth, about a 40mm base equivalent. First, I took a 1x board and glued a few pieces together to give me some thickness. And then I ran it through the table saw. My first cuts were to square the board, to make it flat on all 4 sides. Once my wood was nice, I sent it through 4 more times to whittle it down to size. Alright, now that I have my mega mounting finished, it's time to add a little trim. I have some decorative trim, also made out of pine. It's important to use the same material, otherwise it will not take stain or paint and it won't look as nice. I put the material into my little aluminum cutting guide and quickly had my trim pieces ready for gluing. And after a little black spray paint, I have a lovely little plinth ready for a beefy miniature to sit on top. And that's one kit stand done. Nice and easy, and I think it looks pretty good if I do say so myself. Just don't drop it. Pine is a very soft wood. This plinth is pretty simple to make and probably the cheapest as well. This one is also the most scalable. Just stack more and more pine together, or you can make it hollow in the middle. Next, let's make our first hardwood base. I found this nice piece of oak for $2 at my local hardware store. I could have just bought a square piece, but it would have been more expensive, so I just cut this into little strips and glued it together. Once that was dry, it was time to break out the radial arm saw. This saw is my baby, and it's the only one I would trust for this fine work. It's the most controllable of the three, and it's a blast to use. I did a very similar operation to the table saw, squaring off my board first, and then once it was nice and flat, I finished off all the sides. Did I say I love this saw? It cuts so clean I barely needed to do any sanding. And now with my block cut, it's time to add a little bit of oak trim, and just like with the pine, I put it into my aluminum cutting guide and whacked out 4 pieces of perfect trim. And after gluing these on with some wood glue, I gave it a little sanding and even a rub with some steel wool. This oak has a really nice grain, and I'm not going to waste it with some black spray paint. I'm going to give it a nice wood stain. I'm going to have to find a really nice mini for this base.
2 fun foundations finished, and this one was the hardest to make by far. The actual base wasn't too bad, but cutting trim accurately could have been a video all by itself.
I think this is the best looking of the plinths. The stain looks great, and I can't wait to paint the model that'll live on this nice hardwood base. And lastly, the chop saw. This one is probably the most accessible and easiest to use. Let's make some bases out of this oak dowel, another great and cheap material for simple plinths. I have 4 feet of dowel, so I'm just going to start cutting and give myself some options. These round bases are for my 5 amphibious fellas. They are each very similar but also unique, so I want their bases to also be similar in style, but also each have their own different look. Now it's time for a PP break, a Patreon plug. If you guys like our videos and you want to support us making more, the best way to do it is over on Patreon. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, voting on videos, and extra live streams every week. With that out of the way, I'll zip up, wash my hands, and get back to the video. So now I have a little pile of bases. I picked out 5 I liked and then decided to do a little something special to each one. One I finished just by sanding it smooth. One I carved little grooves all around. One I gave rounded edges. One I beveled the edges with some sandpaper. And the last one, I carved some triangles into the edge with a file. 5 unique bases for 5 unique models. I sanded these down and gave them a little wood stain as well.
And that's 3 styles of mega miniature mounting. These ones were the simplest to make by far, but that doesn't mean I love them any less. In fact, I love them even more.
These guys are great. It helped a lot knowing exactly what mini would go on these plinths. And I think that's the way to approach building a model's throne. These guys will live happily ever after on their nice hardwood kit stands. And bam, 7 unique wooden plinths. These were really fun to make, and it didn't take too much work either. Also, I could have easily made any of these using only hand tools. The power tools were a little overkill, but they were very fun to use. I'm really happy with my bases. Sure, I could have just bought some, but where's the satisfaction in that? Your best minis will look even more special on your homemade plinths.
There are other reasons to make your own fun foundation. Maybe it's the day before a competition and you never bought one, or maybe you're just looking for something fun to do on a Friday night. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and leave a comment. Do you think it's worth making your own, or would you rather just buy one? I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.
That's gonna be the tagline at the end.